Good morning, kids. Today we're going to talk about Lesson 8, Sprite Properties. So your flip grid question of the day is how can we use properties to change their appearance on the screen? So you're going to extend your understanding of sprites by interacting with sprite properties. This lesson starts with a review of what a sprite is, and then it's going to move into more in-depth practices in Game Lab for sprites using properties to change their appearance. So the vocabulary word for this lesson is property, which is a label for a characteristic of a sprite, such as its location or its appearance. And some new code that you're going to master in this lesson is sprite.rotation, sprite.scale, sprite.x, and sprite.y. So let's get started. All right, so in level 2, whoops, giving away some answers here. So in level 2, it has you look at the code below and predict where you think the B sprite is going to appear and what does this program show. So let's take a look at the program first before we make our guess. First line, we have a variable labeled B, and it's going to appear at 200, 200. I'm going to turn on my grid just to see where that's at. So the B is initially set to appear about right there in the middle of the screen. The B is set to the animation B, so the label B is tied to a picture of a B. Then in line 3 and 4, this is brand new for you. Line 3 says B.X gets 350, and then line 4 says B.Y gets 350. So in a nutshell, here's what this means. Initially, the variable is set at 200, 200. That's 200x and 200y. But then down here in lines 3 and 4, we've reassigned the values of x and y to 350. So now that B is going to appear in the bottom right corner of the screen. And then finally, we have that draw sprites. And remember, without that yellow draw sprites, the variable does not show up. So what you should predict then is that this B is going to show up in the bottom right corner of the screen. Let's hit run and see what happens. And there it is. And that's it for level 2 of lesson 8. Level 3, we get a bit more practice. So here we talk about sprite properties. Sprite properties can keep track of all the information your program needs to know about a sprite, such as its size and location. You can change the value of these properties just by looking, you can change the value of these properties just like you do variables and see the results when your sprite is drawn on the screen. So do this. Run the program to see what the sprite, to see where the sprites appear. I can't talk today. And then change the X and Y properties of the paintbrush sprite to move it to the palette. So first I'm going to turn this on. Then I'm going to turn on my grid. So I have two sprites on the screen. I have variable palette, which is right here in the bottom left corner, and I have variable brush, which is right here in the top right corner. So let's look at the code that I've been given. I've got my variable palette, line 1. I've got the label palette assigned to the picture of the palette in line 2. Line 3, I have my variable brush. Line 4, I have my label brush assigned to the picture brush. Line 5, I have my palette X position assigned to 100. Line 6, I have my palette Y position assigned to 300. Line 7, I have my brush position X assigned to 300. And in line 8, I have my brush Y position assigned to 100. So what I need to do is I make some kind of changes here to either line 7 or line 8 or both to get this brush to move down to this palette. So the interesting thing to remember here is that when you are reassigning the coordinate position for a sprite, sprites are drawn from the center of the picture, not the top left corner like we learned about squares. They're drawn from the center of the picture. So the center of my brush right up here is 300, 100. That makes sense because we've got these two coordinates here, 300, 100. So if I want the center of my brush to be closer to the palette, I'm going to guess then this position right here on the screen. That is about 150, 250. So I'm going to change the brush's X value to 150. Whoops, not 159, 150. And I'm going to change my brush's Y value to 250. And let's see what happens. Reset, run. Okay, so this would count for credit because I have accomplished the task. I have moved the X and Y properties of the paintbrush sprite to move it to the palette. It doesn't have to be in this exact location. You could have chosen a number, say down here or up here, but just so long as the paintbrush is touching the palette in some way, this level is complete. Da-da-da! All right, in level 4, we're talking about new properties. So sprites have lots of properties. Check out the 2 new blocks in this activity and try them out for yourself. Notice that different sprites can use the same animation and still look different because of the properties. Do this. Run the program to see how the rotation and scale blocks make the 2 first notes look different. Then use the rotation and scale blocks on the last 2 notes to make them look different too. I'm going to hit run. So they're talking about these notes up here. Okay, so they made that one smaller and kind of tilted. That one's a little bigger and kind of tilted. And then these 2 haven't made any changes at all yet. I'm going to turn on my grid just to see what's going on. So what I've got to do here is I've got to use rotation and scale blocks on these last 2 notes to make them look like the first 2 or something similar. So let's see what kind of code we have. So we've got line 1 is our background, line 2 is the drums, line 3 assigns the label drums to the drum set. So I'm not going to mess with the first few lines here. Line 4 is the variable note 1, and line 5 is note 1. So line 6 is where they change note 1's scale to 0.3. And line 7 is where they change note 1's rotation to 20. And this, if you were wondering, is note 1. So in line 8 is where they call variable note 2. Line 9, note 2 is assigned to the picture 8th note. Line 10, note 2's scale is changed to 0.7. Line 11, note 2's rotation is changed to -30. All right, so that tells me, and when I look at line 12 and 13, that's note 3, and line 14 and 15, that's note 4. So I need these 2 blocks right here. I need a scale and a rotation block for note 3, and a scale and rotation block for note 4. So where am I going to find those? Well, they're pink. So I'm going to come up here to the sprites drawer, and yep, there they are. So first I'm going to grab a hold of a scale block and I'm going to drag it down so that it's just below the dot notation for note 3. Maybe. There. Okay, got to get that yellow line in the right spot. All right, so now I've got sprite.scale. It can't stay sprite, it needs to say note 3. Note 3 scale, and here's where you can pick any number you want. I'm going to say 0.5. You can choose any number you want. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the rotation block, drag it over until I get that nice yellow line right there in the middle and let go. Change the label to note 3 because that's the note I'm talking about. And so now for rotation, I can again pick any number I want. So line 7, they picked 20 for that rotation. And line 11, they picked -30 for that rotation. So I think I'm probably just going to pick 35. Again, you can choose whatever number you want. All right, so I always like to check and see what I've done before I move on. So I'm going to hit reset and run. Okay, so this is the note right here that I just changed the scale and the rotation of. So you can see what happened with lines 14 and 15. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the last note. So grab a scale, drag it down to just below line 17, let go, change that label to note 4. All right, and once again, I get to choose a scale. So I'm going to go 0.8. Okay, again, choose whatever you want. Doesn't matter to me. And then down here, one more dot rotation. Change that label from Sprite to Note 4. And then for rotation, I went positive for line 15. So this time I'm going to do a negative. So a negative 25. Okay, so once again, pick whatever number you want. All right, so let's hit reset and run. And there we go. So I just changed that note. So in level 4 of lesson 8, what you have to do is add 4 new blocks, 2 scales and 2 rotations for the last 2 notes on the list, note 3 and note 4. Let's move on. All right, so this is a practice level. You are free to choose whichever one you want. I'm going to pick the scale property. And remember, for practice levels and challenge levels, if you do more than one, then I will give you bonus points for each one. So on this one, the scale property changes the size of the sprite. Scale of 1 is the normal size. Scale of 2 is twice as big, and scale of 0.5 is half as big. Do this. Use the scale property to make it look like the picture to the right. Make sure that each animal is big enough that it should be seen, or as big as it should be seen. And be sure the fish fits in the pond. All right, so we're referring to this picture over here. Teeny tiny fly, fish in the pond, a little bit bigger cow, really big elephant. What do I have? Oh my goodness. They're like super sized and I can't even see my fish. So I'm going to start with the elephant. So let's look over here at my workspace. I'm not going to mess with line 1 background or line 2 or line 3. I'm not going to mess with the fly yet, so that's 4, 5, and 6. Not going to mess with the fish yet. That's 8, 9, and 10. I'm saving the cow, and I'm starting with the elephant. Why? Just because I feel like if I can make the bigger ones a little bit smaller, I can see the smaller ones a little easier. So if the elephant is 0.1 or is 1 right now, that's normal size. I'm going to try 0.75. I feel like the elephant is a little bit smaller, but not too much smaller. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to leave it for now just to see what happens. So now my cow is definitely way too big, and in the picture to the right over here, the cow looks to be about half the size of the elephant. So I'm going to try a 0.5 just for starters and see what that does. 0.5, and again, I'm just kind of guesstimating here. There's no perfect answer. All right, so far it looks pretty good. So I'm going to now move up to the fish. Now I can actually see the fish. And the 1 is definitely too big. So I'm going to try 0.5 for this fish too and see what happens. Because the fish picture was smaller than the cow picture. Okay, so 0.5 works for the fish because he started out a little smaller anyway in size. All right, and then last but not least, the fly. One more time, I'm going to try half the size, 0.5 for the fly. And looks pretty darn good to me. You guys take a look. What do you think? Does my picture on the left now look like my picture on the right? Pretty darn good. So what did I actually do? Well, I changed the scale of the fly in line 6, changed the scale of the fish in line 10, changed the scale of the cow in line 14, and I changed the scale of the elephant in line 18. And that's it for level 5 of lesson 8. Going to hit finish. All right, from here on out, I'm going to leave you to it. I want to see what you can do for lesson 6, or level 6, the assessment level. So same principle applies here. You've got some food that's way too big for the plate, so you're going to have to make use of that Sprite.scale button for each piece of food. All right, Sprite.scale button. And don't forget to change those labels. And then last but not least, the challenge level. You've got 2 options here. you've got tint, and then you've got height and width. Okay, whichever one you choose, totally up to you, but you got to choose one. So in lesson 8, we learned about sprite properties. We learned about changing the scale. We learned about changing the rotation. And then we also learned about reassigning the X and Y coordinate values. Have a great day, everybody.